right, strap yourselves in. All right, so welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today we're going to unpack some pretty intriguing legal documents, and these are straight from case text. So get this, it's a lawsuit. It's from March 2024. It's titled Emrit v. Combs. And yeah, that Combs is Sean Combs, the one and only P. Diddy, along with Bad Boy Entertainment and Atlantic Records. So what we're going to try to figure out today is what exactly are the claims here, and how did the judge rule?
Well, it's a fascinating case, especially when you consider the plaintiff, Ronald Emrit. He's filed over 200 lawsuits since 2013. I mean, that's just a staggering number, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
It actually earned him what's called a vexatious litigant order in Florida, which basically suggests a pattern of potentially frivolous lawsuits. So knowing this right from the start, I think, probably colored the judge's perspective.
Over 200 lawsuits. Wow. Makes you wonder, like, what's going on there. But let's get into the specifics of this case. What exactly is Emrit claiming happened with Atlantic Records?
Well, the first part of his claim stems from some interactions he had with Atlantic. Back in 2006, he sent them a demo CD, and he even received a call from Ahmet Erdogan, the label's co-founder. Emrit claims that Erdogan told him to sign with another label. But here's the interesting part. Emrit doesn't actually allege any wrongdoing by Atlantic.
Wait, hold on. He's suing them, but doesn't claim they did anything wrong. That seems a little contradictory, doesn't it?
Exactly. It really raises questions about the basis of his claim. And this lack of a concrete injury was likely a red flag for the judge from the get-go. It kind of speaks to a larger point about the legal system, Anyone can file a lawsuit, but there are, specific requirements that must be met, like demonstrating a legitimate harm.
So how does Sean Combs, a.k.a. P. Diddy, fit into all of this? This is where things get really interesting, right?
Okay.
This part of the lawsuit is even more intriguing. Emrit's actually focusing on Sean Combs' public image, specifically after a separate lawsuit was filed against him by Cassandra Ventura. We won't get into the details of that case, but it provides some important context. So is Emrit suggesting that, because there are allegations against Combs, he shouldn't be allowed to, continue with endorsements and public appearances?
Essentially, yes. He even specifically mentions Ciroc vodka billboards as being a public nuisance. Emrit seems to be arguing that anyone who continues to work with Combs, in this case Bad Boy Entertainment and Atlantic Records, is somehow complicit in causing harm. He even uses legal terms like tortious interference with business relations and products liability torts.
Okay, let's unpack those terms a bit for our listener. Tortious interference. What exactly does that mean in this context?
So in simple terms, tortious interference means that someone wrongfully interfered with a contractual or business relationship, causing damage. So Emrit is suggesting that by continuing to work with Combs and promote his products, the defendants are somehow harming him and potentially other consumers.
So he's trying to say that seeing a Ciroc billboard is causing him some kind of quantifiable harm. Help me understand how this even constitutes an injury in the eyes of the law.
Yeah, that's precisely the point that the judge zeroed in on. In legal terms, Emrit failed to demonstrate a concrete injury in fact, which is a requirement for a court to have jurisdiction. He complained about billboards being eyesores, but didn't explain how they specifically harmed him.
It sounds like he's stretching the definition of legal injury pretty thin.
Yeah.
And what about those product liability torts he mentioned?
Right. Well, product liability claims typically involve defective products that cause physical harm or property damage. It's unclear how Emrit is connecting that to Sean Combs' public image or the actions of the record labels. It's a bit of a head-scratcher.
It really does make you wonder what the strategy was here, especially when you consider what Emrit was seeking as a remedy.
Oh, absolutely. He asked for a staggering $45 million in damages. And he didn't stop there. He also wanted Bad Boy Entertainment forced into bankruptcy and receivership. It's a very bold ask, wouldn't you say?
That's putting it mildly. It seems incredibly ambitious, especially given the shaky foundation of the lawsuit.
You're right. And unsurprisingly, the judge wasn't convinced. The case was dismissed because Emrit couldn't articulate a legitimate legal injury. In the judge's own words, absent these types of specific allegations, his complaint reflects nothing more than generalized grievances, which cannot support standing.
So even with a high-profile defendant like Sean Combs, the lawsuit ultimately crumbled because it lacks a solid legal basis and a demonstrable injury. It's a good reminder that the law requires more than just strong opinions or general grievances to move forward.
That's a key takeaway here, and we'll discuss its implications in more detail in just a minute. It's almost like the legal system has like a built-in safeguard. against people who might be abusing it. You can't just, throw around legal terms and expect to win millions.
It's an interesting point you raised. This whole concept of a vexatious litigant, it's kind of fascinating.
It is. Essentially, courts have recognized that some individuals might use litigation as a tool for harassment or to, gain notoriety rather than to seek genuine redress. And the vexatious litigant order placed on Emrit in Florida really suggests that the courts have identified a concerning pattern in his history of lawsuits.
It makes you wonder about the implications. For people who might have legitimate claims, right? But they're then viewed with skepticism because someone like Emrit has clogged up the system with frivolous lawsuits.
Yeah, it's a valid concern. The actions of a few can impact the perception of many, and that's a difficult hurdle to overcome.
So putting aside Emrit's litigious history for a moment, let's talk about this concept of injury in fact, because it seems pretty crucial in this case. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Oh, absolutely. Injury in fact is a core principle in legal standing. It means a plaintiff must have suffered a concrete, particularized, and actual or imminent harm. It can't just be a hypothetical or generalized grievance. Think of it this way. If you go to court, you need to show the judge that you've been personally and directly affected by the defendant's actions.
Okay, so that makes sense. So in Emrit's case, simply being annoyed by Ciroc billboards doesn't meet that threshold.
Right.
It's just a subjective feeling, not a quantifiable injury.
Exactly. The judge needed to see evidence of, tangible harm like financial loss or emotional distress or reputational damage directly linked to the billboards. Emrit simply didn't provide that.
It's interesting how this case touches on broader societal questions too, I think, especially about the intersection of public image, free speech, and the law. We have P. Diddy as a celebrity with a huge public persona, and then you have Emrit trying to make a legal argument based on his image.
Yeah. You've hit on a really intriguing point. This case raises the question, can someone's public image alone ever be grounds for a lawsuit? Or are there always other factors that need to be present?
It's a tricky question.
Right.
On the one hand, we don't want to stifle free speech. People should be able to express opinions, even if they're, critical of others. But on the other hand, we also want to protect individuals from harm, including, harm to their reputation.
It's a delicate balance, for sure. Where do we draw the line between legitimate criticism and actions that cause genuine harm? And how do we define that harm in a legal context?
Yeah, it makes you think about the implications for public figures in general. Should they be held to a different standard when it comes to, legal action?
That's a great question. And it's one that, courts are grappling with more and more these days, especially in the digital age. We live in a world where information, spreads like wildfire online. And reputations can be damaged in an instant. So it raises questions about, the limits of free speech and the need for greater accountability, but also the potential for misuse and censorship.
And in this case, Emrit is also going after the record companies that are associated with Combs. He's suggesting they're somehow responsible for his perceived harm because they continue to work with Combs. Is that even a valid legal argument?
It's a stretch, to say the least. He's essentially arguing, guilt by association, holding a business liable, simply because they have a relationship with someone who is accused of wrongdoing, but hasn't been found guilty in a court of law. That's a slippery slope.
It feels like he's reaching for anything he can to build a case, but without that, core element of demonstrable harm, it all falls apart.
Yeah, it's a great example of how a lawsuit, even one with, a high-profile defendant, and complex legal terminology can be completely undermined by a lack of fundamental legal grounding.
So what does this all mean for our listener? What's the key takeaway here?
I think the biggest takeaway is that, the law is nuanced and complex, but there are, core principles that need to be met.
Even if you're going up against someone like P. Diddy, you still need to have a solid legal argument.
Right.
Just feeling annoyed or offended by someone's public image, that's not enough to win in court.
Exactly. You need to be able to show that concrete injury. And this case really highlights another crucial point, I think. The legal system, while it's designed to protect individual rights, can also be misused. So we need to be mindful of this balance, I think, and understand the potential consequences of frivolous or vexatious litigation.
Like you said earlier, the actions of a few can impact many. And Emrit's pattern of lawsuits, even if this one was dismissed, it might make people more skeptical of future plaintiffs.
Absolutely. And it speaks to the importance of, being informed, not just about the law itself, but about, the actors involved and their motivations. It encourages us to think critically,
Yeah.
about the information we consume and to question assumptions.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Emrit v. Combs, I'm still left wondering, could there ever be a scenario where public image concerns alone could actually form a valid legal claim? It feels like uncharted territory, legally speaking. Where does free speech end and harm begin when it comes to public image?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, and one that legal scholars are really grappling with right now, especially, as you said, as our world becomes increasingly digital.
Yeah.
Think about it. Social media, it allows information, both true and false, to spread at an unprecedented rate. Reputations can be built and destroyed like that in the blink of an eye.
So how do we, reconcile that with the need to protect individuals from, baseless attacks or attempts to, manipulate public opinion? Is there a way to establish, clear legal boundaries without stifling legitimate discourse?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a complex issue with it. No easy answers. On the one hand, we have freedom of speech, which protects, individuals' right to express their opinions and even criticize others. But on the other hand, we also want to protect individuals from harm, including harm to their reputation.
And as we've seen in this case, right, with Emrit and Sean Combs, it's not always easy to determine where one ends and the other begins, especially when you add in
the layer of celebrity and public image.
Right, because with someone like Sean Combs, his public image is so intricately tied to his brand and his business. So does criticism of his actions or behavior cross the line into something that can be legally actionable if it impacts his business? These are the kinds of questions that courts may need to address more and more in the future.
It raises a whole host of ethical and legal considerations, doesn't it? How do you prove intent to harm? How do you measure the damage caused by negative public opinion? And who gets to decide? What constitutes harm in this context? Is it purely financial, or does it encompass emotional distress or damage to one's reputation? These are thorny issues that require careful consideration.
It's definitely making me think differently about the power of public image and how it interacts with the legal system. We often see public figures embroiled in controversies that play out in the court of public opinion. But this case highlights how those controversies can spill over into actual legal battles.
It is. It's a reminder that the law is constantly evolving to keep pace with societal changes and technological advancements. What might have been considered a frivolous claim a few decades ago could potentially form the basis for a legitimate lawsuit in the future, as our understanding of harm and reputation evolves.
So while we may not have definitive answers today, I think this deep dive into Emrit v. Combs has certainly given us a lot to ponder.
It has. It's a case that really underscores the importance of our critical thinking and a nuanced understanding of the law. It encourages us to look beyond the surface and to consider the broader implications of seemingly outlandish legal claims.
And it also reminds us that the law is a living, breathing entity, constantly adapting to the challenges of a changing world. Who knows, maybe one day we'll be revisiting this very case as a precedent-setting decision that reshaped the legal landscape.
Only time will tell. But one thing is for sure. The intersection of law, public image, and free speech is sure to generate even more fascinating legal battles in the years to come.
And we'll be here to break them down for you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.